Welcome to FontCast, Tasmania's top-rating political podcast, and can I say, the place to get your political news.
That's right.
I'm Becher, Townshend, and I'm here with my colleague Brad Stansfield and the Mercury's David Killick with just a quick pod to follow up our interview with the Premier and to round out a few things from last time. So last episode, last episode, our first of the year, we had two exclusives which were subsequently picked up by the mainstream media. First was the scratch on the Spirits.
That's right.
Subsequently
I
reported...
would note on that. Yeah, sorry. You go, Beach.
Subsequently reported in the Examiner and on the ABC on the Friday after we went to air. Interestingly, according to Ben Cedar of the Examiner, it was first denied by the TT line.
Yeah. Maybe they didn't know about themselves.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Perhaps
they need to subscribe to the FontCast.
Well, they clearly do need to listen, don't they?
Well, David wants to interrupt.
No, I did hear they got a touch-up kit included in the purchase price, a couple of 4-litre buckets of paint for just this eventuality.
Just wondering whether they get it back on warranty, you know. Look, the scratch wasn't here when I didn't notice that before I picked it up. Anyhow, secondly, Brendan Blomley for Franklin. Reported a week after we went to air by Matthew Denham in the Australian newspaper, and then, of course, everybody else piled in.
Yeah, Beach, and can I just add on that one? My understanding is that Mr. Blomley is hosting a quote-unquote garden party on the 15th of February.
Okay.
I'm not sure where it is.
What does one do at a garden party?
Well,
is that croquet?
I think what one does at this garden party is announces one's candidacy as an independent candidate for Franklin. That's the word I'm hearing.
There you
So
go.
Sounds far less interesting.
there you go. You heard it here first. Again, Matthew Denham. That is, you can have that one for free.
I wonder if any of his political mates are going to rock along to that, do you think?
Well, possibly they might be now reconsidering
See
their
a friend. A rift.
Yeah.
Anyway, that will be interesting.
Anyhow, let's get back to a couple of other exclusives which are coming this podcast as well.
Yeah, we've got a bit more coming this pod, Beach. But before we get to all that, obviously last pod was the first time we went to air for this year. He's already crossed his arms. He knows where we're going here.
That was the time before last.
Yeah,
last time
the first pod. That's right. I got a lot of feedback, and I gather Beecher got even more feedback.
Yes, I certainly did.
About the revelation that he killed the pulp mill. Now, since then, Beecher's been sitting in the office mostly with his door shut and a big sign on the front saying, "Brad, keep out."
Well, I don't think the words are "keep out," but it's certainly Brad something.
It's two words.
2 words, that's for sure.
I gather you want to set the record straight, Beach.
Well, I don't know if I want to set the record straight, but because I have nothing to deny in this process, but I must admit I have almost been stopped on the street by people looking at me going, "Oh, so you're the guy that stopped the pulp mill? Oh, that's great." It sort of answers all my questions. They knew it all stopped, but they didn't know who to blame. I do want to set the record straight and, also draw to your attention your failure to reform public sector superannuation when you're in government, local government reform, and, of course, Year 12 high school sector reform, just a few of the failures of yours. But just getting back to the pulp mill, just to be clear, to set the record straight, what happened was I ran the campaign for the Hampshire pulp mill.
Okay,
right? That's
what I said. Yeah,
that's correct.
Yeah.
But what occurred was when I was running the campaign was I was running it at the behest of Paul Arnold, who was the general manager of Burnie City Council at the time, and Paul and I have discussed this. We're going to refrain from the defamation case.
I never mentioned Paul. You did.
And then what occurred was John Gay at the time had shortlisted 2 sites.
Yep.
One of which was Hampshire and the other of which is Bell Bay. The challenge was at the time the head of the Cradle Coast Authority had it in his head that it should be at
Roger Yench.
Roger Yench, that's correct. Had it in his head that it should be at Railton. At the time, I remember pointing out to Roger that, the truth of the matter is John Gay's saying it should either be at Hampshire or at in the Tamar Valley, and the last time I looked, Hampshire's on the northwest coast, so how about we support that? Took me a little while to bring Roger round, and then I finally got Roger round, so we got the Cradle Coast Authority on side. And then, of course, John Gay announced that, unfortunately, it wasn't going to be built there. It was going to be built in the Tamar Valley at Bell Bay. And so, as a result of that, we accepted that was going to be the case. My conversation with Paul and the industry up on the northwest coast was, you've got all the skills here, so let's just work for the pulp mill to occur and take it to Bell Bay. But unfortunately, while I'd convinced Roger into that, unfortunately I couldn't unconvince him that we'd missed the opportunity and we needed to move on. I think that's the point really where you're getting at with that whole debate.
So what you're saying is, once John Gay announced it was Bell Bay and not Hampshire, you dropped it like a hot potato, went back, came back to Hobart.
Well, more fundamentally, I actually pointed out that Bell Bay was an hour and a half down the road, that the northwest coast had a lot of the skills and the businesses that would prosper very well, and don't get bitter about it, get on with it and support it at Bell Bay. So I did more than that. I said, well, let's get with it and move forward.
But Roger Yench kept on campaigning for Hampshire. So what you're really saying is it's Roger Yench's fault?
No, I'm not saying that.
Sure? This is your chance to say it.
No, I'm not going to say that because we know whose fault it was, Brad, and it wasn't Roger's fault. I think you know and I know that it was someone else's fault.
Well, my view is it was the Hampshire campaign led by Roger Yench, not apparently post you each, that played a big part in it. But yes, you are right. The ultimate person to euthanise the pulp mill was Malcolm Turnbull, when before the 2007 election, remember this, David, he announced the chief scientist to review everything, even though it had already got all the approvals, because he was worried about losing his seat in Wentworth following a strong campaign from businessman, in inverted commas, Jeff Cousins at the time. And once that happened, I think we've said this before, to delay is to deny, and once it was delayed by that additional review, that was the end of the pulp mill.
And by Cousins' own confession, he actually said capital is fluid, and if you delay, then capital moves elsewhere, and that's what had occurred. Anyhow,
so that's cleared it up. Innocent.
Thank you very much. I'm glad I'm off the...
Sam's looking unconvinced.
Yeah. Anyhow, okay. Well, we're recording straight off the back of our interview with the Premier. David, what did you make of it all?
Got a lot of notes he made during the interview.
He did.
Well, some of those were stories I need to be cracking on with rather than gabbing about politics. But no, it was interesting. I mean, I found most fascinating him saying that he was by nature an introvert because some things make a lot of sense now. He's a good parliamentary performer, but clearly that's not where he'd most like to be. So yeah, it's interesting. I consider myself an introvert, and you need to overcome that. And one of the reasons I come here is to practice speaking in a public forum without mangling.
Too much.
Yeah, but no. So I found that interesting, and the longevity of his political career is also interesting because you see over the period of time that the toll that takes on people. And most people are in and out in a much shorter time. Look at people like, comparable politicians. I think of David Bartlett being a strong education advocate, and he was certainly in our parliament for a lot shorter time. The dead cat story was
a literal dead cat story.
Was a bad day out, but and the planning reform announcement.
He's dragged it out of him, Beach.
It was like pulling teeth, that one, but we got there.
And it's just interesting how much is going on in planning. We've had a declaration of a major project this week. We've got projects of state significance going on. We've got DAPs and all of those sorts of things.
And on that first one, the declaration of the major project, halfway through the media release, everyone's going to be a major project in renewables.
And I come back to this, we've toyed with local government reform in this state for so long and moved towards it, moved away, and there's such a vested interest in that sector, in perhaps the status quo, and I just wonder whether you know, we continue to put little band-aids on problems that we're too afraid to fix. Clearly there's an issue with the planning system. Clearly there is the planning process as it stands is holding us back. Clearly there is a need for reform where we don't have, I always get the number of councils wrong, 29 planning authorities. You know, so now we've got 29 planning authorities, we've got
263 aldermen, I think.
Potential DAPs, we've got the project state certificates of progress, and I feel like over time we're making things more complicated, which is not desirable, and not less complicated.
Well, yeah, but the beauty of the announcement today was this issue around third-party appeals. That's quite significant. That stops the system being gamed. Hopefully, still allows people to have their right of appeal or their right of, their right to have their voice heard going through the process. So, look, I can't help but feel that is a common sense announcement. I was impressed with the Premier today, I've got to say, and I reflected, there wasn't, I know this sounds silly, but I suppose it's because I've worked as a contemporary of the Premier over many years, but there wasn't much, there was a lot I learned, but I wasn't surprised when he talked about education being his most sort of central, his proudest achievement and those kind of things. And also, it was interesting, I raised the issue that he was shy, and that's because I remember meeting him as a young politician, and I remember reflecting, this poor guy is so shy, So,
I found a great photo in our archive that predates his political career by a decade or more of this young Jeremy Rockcliff, and it actually, he just looks like a, young knockabout country boy, but you can almost sense it from that very old picture on the Rockcliff family farm.
I think that experience where he went and worked as a Lifeline counsellor, which I've always
clearly
known,
very formative,
but it was very influential on him. And I know a group of people around him, as a result of that, really encouraged him to go into Parliament and go into politics. So look, I thought it was insightful. And I thought it was really helpful to get a better understanding of the man. This constant sort of idea that he's going to go, I didn't see it, so there you go.
There was something else that was in there that was very subtle, but I think both of you picked up on it. There was the talk about the right sizing the public service, and we had a chat about sustainability.
I sensed his advisors in the room and stiffening at that point.
Sustainability of the budget and right sizing the public service, and I know you've both got some pretty strong opinions on the bureaucracy, and I think this is one of those occasions where I'm going to agree, because I think our public servants in this state do a great job, but I think there's a lot of bureaucracy that's holding us back. Look at the things that we do as a state. Look at the things we do in sport, look at the things we do in Antarctic logistics, look at our advanced manufacturing sector, our renewable energy, our defence industries, tourism and hospitality. We lead the world in some of these sectors, and yet somehow in our delivery of government services, we're the worst in the nation. And I don't understand how a state, a populace, a workforce that can create, a tourism experience like Pennicott creates, or that can, resupply an Antarctic ship in, 6 hours, or that can build some of these advanced manufacturing defence projects, can't deliver. We were looking at everything that we do in the public sector seems to cost more and not be to the same standard. I'm going through the ROGs, and on so many measures, we spend more and we get less, and there's no good explanation for that anymore, because we can do it in the private sector. It's not the people. It's not the people at the coalface. It's
the processes.
It's not the politicians. It's something in the bureaucratic water.
It's the processes that are implemented to do these things, and that's the challenge that we face. And if you look at one of the challenges from the business community that we face is the interpretation of laws. When you talk about planning, all those things, it's about the way in which those laws are interpreted. It's the processes that people are required to go through. And then frankly, and I know we don't want to bang on about the TT line, but, they're a great ferry service who have been asked to buy 2 boats, fair enough, right? And then build a berth. They're a ferry service. They're not a berth builder. And I think we're asking a lot of these organisations, and we're asking them to suddenly skill up overnight, and the system is just simply not geared to achieve it. And the sooner there's a better understanding around that. The other challenge I find is often the bureaucracy looks at the private sector as a competitive element. So in other words, they see, if you go, well, we could do this in the private sector, but that'd compromise the operation of the bureaucracy. That would, work against it. And it's like, no, we're just saying that this is probably a more efficient way to deliver it. Perhaps your role is to monitor it and check that it works and check that people are getting good value and all those good things that a good bureaucratic process should do. But the reality is the private sector can deliver these things better. And we sort of talk about being the worst in the world. We're not the worst in the world. We've just got challenges, and in a small state like Tasmania, we see it all the time.
Well, when you asked the Premier about it, he very loyally defended his 35,000 employees. But then when you pressed him, I think he did start to say some of the things that you were more hopefully might say Beach about in terms of the bureaucracy working for the government and for the ministers.
Do you mean the deep state?
Not the other way around. No, Sam, no. Just generally, and I'm conscious of time. My view on the interview, I thought it was great. I think we saw. I mean, I've obviously known Jeremy for a long time, not quite as long as you, but possibly a bit better. And I thought it was great that he was. There wasn't very often in the interview where we pulled out the talking points. Maybe once or twice we talked about mothers and kids and stopping him in supermarkets. But apart from that, it really was Jeremy unplugged, and it was great. I think we learned a lot about Jeremy as a person and what keeps him going. On the announcement, the third party one, the only point I'd make about that is, as I recall, and I'm happy to stand corrected, but I think my memory serves me correctly, that was actually a 2014 election promise that we made as part of our proposed changes to the planning system, which never or have not yet taken place, and I can tell the reason why. It starts with B and ends in Y, bureaucracy. So I'll be very interested to see whether they can make it happen this time, given the failure to achieve it the first time when we had arguably a very, very strong mandate. But it was great.
Well, we got a strong sense of confidence from the Premier that he was going to do it. They've come out of the blocks well this year, I've got to say, so it'll be interesting to see.
And can I say, Beach, before we move on, that interview is now live on the pod and on the YouTube channel, so go and check it out.
Yep, well worth a watch. Right, so just a couple of quick things today. A few exclusives that we thought we'd just drop in.
A bit more just to keep the mainstream media on their toes. Beach. Sorry, David. You've heard a bit of news about Marinus Link, Beach.
Yeah, look, I've heard that there's a bit of a sign on it at the moment from the state for sale. Buy it now. Quick option for the feds to come in and do a deal on Marinus. That my understanding is they're trying to sell it.
So the state, as I understand it, owns 12.5% of the as not yet built multi-gazillion dollar Marinus Link.
How much is it?
I think that was 125 million they were going to invest, or something in that order. For that
it's bounced around a bit over the years. I think we go from 100% ownership to 12.5%.
Yeah, but I think the value is around that, or was when it was last announced.
I think there's an expression of interest process.
If they're looking to sell...
I'm not expressing an interest, I just wanted to
So to be clear, your understanding is, Beach, the state government's looking to entirely exit any ownership of Marinus Link.
Yeah, I think so. And the word that I'm hearing is that that's not such a stupid idea. It removes the state from the whole issue, gives the feds the control of it.
So selling it to the feds?
Yes, selling it to the feds, and gives the feds an opportunity to just build it, get on with it and develop it. So that's what I'm hearing.
Certainly remove a big liability from Tasmania's books if that took place.
And that's the other issue is, for the federal government, Marinus Link is, loose change. Perhaps it's a bit more than loose change. But for the state government, every time the price varies, it impacts on the state's balance sheet. So it's quite the hot potato for them from a financial point of view. But anyhow, the second bit.
Oh, the other thing, just quickly, Beach, and I know you want to have a little bit of a rant about a certain online newspaper owned in the UK before we go, but my ear to the ground tells me that there's maybe a bit of movement afoot in the senior levels of the Department of State Growth.
Yes.
And I do recall we had an exclusive a couple of years ago, in fact,
we did.
predicting that Craig Limkin would be appointed to the secretary of that department. And in fact, so it came to pass. Word is that he may be considering his options in that position.
Yeah, there you go. So I think there's a little bit of huffing and puffing in the senior ranks of the public service as we speak over that very issue. So, yeah, I suppose we'll have to watch this space, won't we? Anyhow,
this is where you'll find it out.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, it's where you found out when he was arriving. So,
that's right.
Anyhow, listen, as some people will be aware, we had a bit of a report, bit of a focus on Font and some of the companies that Brad and I are investors in, such as Font Publishing, such as Enterprise Marketing and Research. Sorry, a fine sponsor of this podcast. And they did a bit of an expose on us. Attempted. They scoured some 200 editions of the Font Publishing newspapers.
That must have been exciting.
Reading the Tasmanian country.
How many cows can you look at?
Well, it is a page turner if you're from the country, I've got to say. King Island Courier, the Sorrel Times, the Tasman Gazette, the East Coast View, the Northern Courier, and even the Derwent Valley Gazette, to see whether we were acting inappropriately, whether we were abusing.
Well, I think they started with the premise that we were.
I think that was exactly right. I think the assumption was we were, and the good thing was, from my point of view, I think the smoking gun in this case was me writing an article in 2023 for the Tasmanian country, which I had I don't know what you'd say, but I put my byline on it, on a story I wrote for a newspaper that I own, about the 2023 Australian Dairy Conference, which was run down here at Rest Point, and I think Kaz said, could you get down and write me 400 words on it, because we didn't have anybody else to do it, and as Brad will remind many people, I was once a journalist.
A grade.
A grade, there you go. So, yes, that
was it. What page of the paper was this?
Page 13 was a wingy down page 13, and I thought it was
a cracker of a story. I remember it.
That's what I'm saying. I thought it was a cracker of a yarn with pick.
You took the pick too.
Yeah, I did take the pick.
13.
Byline on the pick as well.
Yeah. I'll be saltier about that than
I could have made a phone call saying, sorry.
That's a 3 all day.
Well, 3 all day was first page lead, thank you very much. But anyhow, listen, that's about as close as a smoking gun they could get. Brad and I have both shared a link to the article on LinkedIn. Look, from my point of view, the good thing was both two respected journalists, Roger Hansen and Alison Andrews, both talked about their time working for us and talked about the lack of editorial interference that's being suggested by others.
They didn't ring me.
No, they didn't. Well,
I could have given them some.
You've never worked for us. So.
Yeah, you've never worked for us.
I might have an opinion.
Yeah, well, you might. Well, they certainly rang a few people in their story. But look.
What are you paying?
From my point of view, the delightful thing about that story, and I encourage people to read it in full, is it just highlights the fact that we have actually acted in integrity. And you know, I've had this business for 23 years, and Tassie's a small state, and you have to act appropriately in a small community. Well, you have to act appropriately, full stop. But in a small community, you soon get flushed out, and we didn't. So look, I just think it's appalling that we have to deal with that kind of crap sometimes.
There's nothing that you guys put above your editorial integrity. From my experience of working with you guys. Without that, then those newspapers are useless. What a waste of time.
It's the same as having a polling company, right? If you compromise the integrity of your polling company, the poll's not worth a pinch of shit. I mean, it's the same thing. Every one of our newspapers has Font Publishing on page 2, who it's printed by, who we are, where we are.
No one cares what I say, but That's what I've noticed.
Anyhow,
People do care.
It's an interesting debate. I mean, we run across the same thing. I think there's an intellectual obsession with the ownership of media organisations that on a theoretical level is really interesting to some people. But on a practical level, it's not. You know, I work for a News Corp paper. We're owned by Rupert Murdoch. There are a lot of people who will not engage with our content on principle because who owns the company or who has a major shareholding in the company. And look, that's their absolute right to decide, you know, but I think they're missing out. I think they're missing out on something. And the point I'd make here is, you know, and I'm not here to pump up your tyres, and I'm not a consumer of those, you know, I don't read Tas Country because I don't live in the country. But from a media point of view where people should consume critically a diverse media diet, it is better for those mastheads to exist than to not exist. And in the case of the Derwent Valley Gazette and in the case of Tas Country, they might not exist.
And King Island.
And King Island. So, you know, would we rather have more media outlets? Would we rather have more voices in the marketplace of ideas or not? You know, and I think we get into this silo mentality. I read The Guardian. I like the climate coverage that Adam Morton, their local correspondent, does. I read it religiously. I love his stuff. Don't like everything I read there, but I still engage with it. I read the New York Times. I read the Sydney Morning Herald. I read our stuff. I read the Examiner.
And the Advocate.
The Advocate. My life, you know, your life is poorer if you get into those silos. We train ourselves to do that on the internet. I think the ownership thing can be a bit of a distraction. Engage with the content. They've tried that as well. I don't think they've come up with the smoking gun, you know.
No.
But, you know,
look, we're a Tasmanian-owned business. A couple of local blokes having a go.
It'd all be great if it was all owned by voluntary, charity, trust, benevolent, blind, trust, philanthropist, bullshit.
Yeah.
You know, we live in the real world. People are capable of detecting and, you know, coping with perceptions of bias. You know, they go, oh, well, I read that, but I didn't quite. You know, we're going to be exposed to things we don't agree with in life, and, you know.
That's in the defence of The Guardian. They don't try and cover up the fact that they are a left-wing blog. Like, that's what they are. So this is what they do.
Range of
He's right. You can read on their website that they were initially funded by the slave trade. It's all there. Right. They're not hiding it. And there's no hypocrisy or anything on their behalf.
Lift across the river on your back
country next week.
And the
slave trade newspaper, the firm.
UK-owned slave trade newspaper. Anyhow, Brad, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No, you've covered it all, Beach. I'm conscious of time, and
all right.
you know, we've had a long day after the Premier.
I think that's enough. All right, FontCast is brought to you by Enterprise Marketing and Research Services, Tasmania's leading and trusted research provider. Thank you, Brad.
Great to be here.
And David, as ever, thank you very much.
Been terrific, thanks.
Don't forget, you can now catch us on the YouTube channel FontCast.
Which, just for the record, I didn't set up. It was my son.
Ah, there you go. It's good to hear.
That's what works.
Yes, that's exactly right. FontCast is produced and directed by Sam Eichen for Eichen Media. Until next time, carry on.